The SS Norway was formerly the SS what?
France.
SS stands for what?
Steamship.
MS stands. This ship is the largest cruise ship ever built. The largest cruise ship ever built. Oh, I just heard this man down here say, oh, Mabel, he just made his first mistake. And let's not say anything because we don't want to embarrass him. You don't think this is the largest cruise ship, or have you heard different? Has anybody heard different, that this is not the largest cruise ship? There was another company that said that they had the largest cruise ship, whose name will never cross my lips. But they were claiming to be heavier than we, and they were weighing some 74,000 tons. But we added some decks up here. Now we're weighing 76,000 tons plus. They also claim to be able to carry more passengers than we. But since we added these 2 new decks, we now carry more passengers. And the only reason they carried more passengers than we did previously is because they stuffed them in like sardines in a can, and we here at Norwegian Cruise Lines would never do that to you. So when you hear the sovereign of the sea say, oh, I said the name. Oh, the cat's out of the bag. Well, anyway, this cruise ship has always been the largest cruise ship built in terms of physical dimension. This ship is 1,035 feet long. To give you some idea of its size, it's the largest cruise ship ever built. To give you some idea of its size, if I put 3 football fields end to end, this ship is longer. If I could stand this ship up on end, or we could stand this ship up on end, it would be almost as high as the Empire State Building, shy 100 feet. This ship stood up on end is the same height as the Eiffel Tower. This ship, from the surface of the water to the top of its stacks, is the same height as the Arc de Triomphe, or some 17 stories high. This ship has a beam. What does beam mean? The width of the ship at its widest point. This ship has a beam of 110 feet plus some inches. Let's round it off and say 111 feet. 111 feet. This ship has, because of its beam, because of that 111 feet, has one problem. What is that problem? Not a mistake made in its construction or dimension.
Can't go through the Panama Canal.
Cannot go through the Panama Canal. And listen to this. Cannot go to the Panama Canal because it's 10 inches too wide. 10 inches to go through the Panama Canal. So you be very careful with those midnight buffets, adding those critical inches to those hips. This ship has a draft. I don't mean beer. What does draft mean? Yes, the amount of water it takes to displace water in order to float the ship. This ship has a draft of 34 feet. 34 feet. Oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you that this ship, because of its draft, cannot go into any other ports of call. There's just too much of us in the water. And because we cannot go into our ports of call, as a matter of fact, we just about squeak into the port of Miami. The port of Miami had to be specially dredged to accommodate the SS Norway. The port of Miami is some 36, 37 feet in depth. So we just about squeak into the port of Miami. So again, be very careful of these midnight buffets. We don't want you gaining weight and causing us to drag bottom when we go home. There are 3 dates I'd like you to remember: 1957, 1958, and 1960. This ship was launched May 11th, 1960. At the time this ship was launched, it was in trouble. Unbeknownst to the pride of the French people and the French government, at the time this ship was launched, it was already in trouble because of 2 very dark clouds on the horizon. As a matter of fact, the French government and the French people had no way of knowing that in a scant 14 years, this ship would go into mothballs, if you will. Does anybody happen to know those 2 dark clouds on the horizon, which was to bring about the demise of the SS France in a very few years? Aircraft. Remember, I asked you to remember date 1957. In 1957, there were being carried by cruise ships, cruising, some 1,030,000 passengers. In 1958, jet air travel was introduced, and jet air travel quickly took thousands of people who would ordinarily cruise, took them, and were now flying them faster across the Atlantic. So that at the time this ship was launched, it had already, the industry was already losing thousands of passengers to air travel. As a matter of fact, at one point in this ship's history, there were no more than 200 passengers on this ship and a crew of about 1,000. Now, can you just visualize that? Can you imagine 200 passengers wandering aimlessly about the corridors of this ship, looking desperately for a friendly face to smile into? And let's not talk about service. Well, you dare not go to the bathroom when you got service you weren't looking for. With a crew of 1,000, Well, during this period of time, a number of ships were decommissioned, and a number of ships were sold and were reduced to the scrap metal. They were sold off for the scrap metal and were disassembled. The French government and the French people, the SS France was having the same problem. But the French government, this ship being the pride of the French government and the French people, the French government subsidized the ship to the tune of millions of dollars to keep her afloat during these terrible times. And then something else happened, the other dark cloud on the horizon finally broke. Something else happened which really brought the ship to its knees. Does anybody happen to know what that was? The cost of fuel escalated tremendously. The cost of fuel escalated, the numbers of passengers were decreasing. This ship went into mothballs, if you will, in 1974. 1974, and remained in mothballs for 4 years until 1978, during which time there were a number of offers made to purchase the SS Norway, SS France, I should say. One successful offer was made by an Arab concern, and they did indeed purchase the ship. They wanted to turn the ship into a floating hotel, but they were not able to get subsequent financing, and Closter came along, and in 1974 he purchased the ship from this Arab concern for some $18 million, a pinch, a drop in the bucket. $18 million the ship was purchased for. He purchased the ship for its scrap metal value alone. Had he intended, he could have disassembled the ship, sold off the scrap metal, and maybe made $1 million or $2 million. But thankfully that was not his intent. He set about spending some $130 million to $150 million. That price varies depending on which historical account you're reading. He spent some $130 million to $150 million in the conversion of the ship from the SS France to the SS Norway. Now, I'll tell you about where he spent some of that money, but areas of the ship which remain the same today as it did when this ship was the SS France are. How many of you are familiar with Troll Land, or the nursery, which is on the international deck? Well, the murals on the wall of Troll Land, or the nursery, were painted when this ship was the SS France. How many of you are dining in the Windward dining room? The Windward dining room remained much the same today as it did when this ship was the SS France. In those days, every evening, the ladies had to dress in formal attire, and the men had to get in tuxedos to go down to eat. How many? This evening, you're all going to have the opportunity to meet the master of the vessel at his gala cocktail party, where you'll meet the master of the vessel and have your photograph taken with him in a room called Club International. I must tell you, that's my favorite room. It is a beautiful, beautiful room. It has a sort of a continuity with the past, if you will. They're not building ships the way they did now, the way they did when this ship was built. It's just prohibitive in terms of money. This ship, as I might not have told you, but this ship was built during the era of the 1,000-footers. It was built during the era of the 1,000-footers. Now, there are 4 ships which fit very comfortably within that era of the 1,000-footers. Anybody happen to know what the name of those 4 ships are, which fit very comfortably within the era of the 1,000-footers? Ships which are 1,000 feet or better. The Queen Mary is one. The other queen is another one, Queen Elizabeth. Not the United States and not the Huey, too. They're not. Both of those are less than 1,000 feet. But not the Amsterdam. Not the Amsterdam. But how many of you World War II veterans in here? This ship, I'll give you a clue. This ship was caught fire